Good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Dick Walker, and I'm coming to you from Spokane, Washington. I have a guest this morning, Dr. Lee Ostler, from down in Tri-Cities, Washington. And it's August the 20th, 2022. And we're going to have a discussion this morning in general about the difference between redox signaling molecules that come in our blue bottle and our cell performance products, because some people are confused about just how they relate and how they interact. And we just want to clarify that there are no redox signaling molecules in the cell performance products, but they certainly are redox active. And so we are going to discuss the differences and similarities and hopefully to clarify that relationship. We're not going to talk about individual ingredients in the cell performance products, but if you want to see our discussion on that we had back in May, it was May the 7th, and you can go to the redoxmatters.com website and click on videos, and under my name you'll see the recording of Lee and I talking about the individual ingredients in cell performance and how they interact and how they relate and how they function in the redox environment. So we're going to try to keep it simple. Don't worry if it seems too complex for you. Don't worry, you don't have to really understand this, but I think you will be able to. But understand that there is science behind this, and that it's everything that we do at ASEA is documented in science and works on very sound scientific principles. So we're going to give you some talking points, I think, and if you're interested in maybe a little bit more in-depth conversation on the ASEA 5 presentation yesterday, and that's recorded and available on Redox Matters as well, there was a discussion by some of the experts at corporate about this very subject. And so if you want to dive deeper or get a different or another explanation of what we're talking about, you can go there, and we'll bring in references from that as well. And so let's get started. I'll just discuss a little bit briefly about redox signaling molecules, and then Lee and I will I think have an informative and hopefully maybe even an entertaining conversation about these two subjects. But life is really about electrons moving about from one molecule to another. And that is what powers life. That is what gives our cells energy in the form of ATP. And without it, life would not exist. Reduction is just gaining an electron, and oxidation is just giving up an electron. And that happens at the speed of light in our cells, happens all the time, constantly. And we will probably make reference to oxygen being a vital ingredient to life, because it is a very strong electron acceptor. So it has what we call a very strong, and I think, Lee, if I'm not mistaken here, it has the strongest redox potential of any molecule. Is that right?
Yeah, they call it oxygen is the most electronegative. And that's what gives it power within the cell to attract the electrons that keep the electron transport chain in motion.
Right. And it's at the bottom of the electron transport chain in the mitochondria. And what happens there basically is that a food molecule enters the cell, enters the mitochondria, and then as electrons are stripped from that molecule and turning it into another molecule, that happens progressively. And as those electrons move through that chain, each of those steps releases electrical energy that gets captured by the cell in the form of essentially chemical energy, ATP in the very strong bonds in adenosine triphosphate. And then the cell uses that chemical energy to power all of the activities that happen in the cell. So it starts out as an electrical electron moving and turns into chemical energy, essentially. At least that's how I understand it. Is that kind of the way you would explain that, Lee?
Yeah, if we all go back into our, early science classes or physics classes that we might have all taken in school, and think about a rock being on top of a hill. if there was a boulder sitting on top of a hill, and ask the question, well, how much energy is in that rock? You might be tempted to say, well, there's none. It's just sitting there, still. But because there's the element of gravity involved, if we move that rock to the slope and maybe give it a little nudge and start it rolling down, there's energy in the motion or the movement of that rock until it hits the bottom, which is the most stable, lowest energy place there is. And so we speak in terms of potential energy. And on the way down, the rock is releasing energy. And so the metaphor there is a very accurate one in terms of if you put an electron at the top of the metabolic processes, at the top of the metabolic hill, as it were, and put it in motion and start and having it cascade down through a series of reactions, basically that electron is just moving like a hot potato on a conveyor belt from one hand to the next hand to the next hand. And with each transfer, there's a metabolic reaction where energy is released. And we harvest that energy. As you say, we call that adenosine triphosphate. And we utilize that energy to power our muscles and our thinking and to provide, the kinetic and thermal, energy in our body that just keeps us alive. But it's the gravity, if you will. It's that electronegative pull of the oxygen molecule that is doing that. If oxygen weren't there, then the electron quits moving. There's no gravity anymore. And so it has to be there. That's why oxygen is so necessary for life. And in a fire, if you lit a fire with wood, or propane or whatever, but removed the oxygen from the environment, the electrons quit transferring because they're going from a reduced state in the wood to the oxygen, and it liberates energy in the process. So there's a nice metaphor that some people can get their hands around, but that's what powers this. That this is transduction or movement of electrons, but pure and simple.
And it's that oxygen that provides the hill, so to speak, that the electrons can fall down and release all that stored energy essentially in the food molecule. So, in the end, no oxygen, no energy, no life. And that's ergo the really super importance of oxygen to life, but also the super importance of electrons moving through that chain, through that transport chain. So it really is about body electric and how that gets transferred into chemical energy. But the problem is that not all of that oxygen that's present gets reduced, right? And some of it gets released as reactive oxygen species. And so if you hear us talking about ROS or reactive oxygen species, that's what requires antioxidants to accept those electrons, or to give an electron to the reactive oxygen species, neutralize it so that it doesn't damage other cells. And in fact, those reactive oxygen species that are part of that electron transfer, electron chain, that's what our redox signaling molecules are largely consist of. And the body has over time figured out how to use those reactive oxygen species in a signaling function to serve as a cell communication mechanism. So Lee, anything we missed on kind of the basic understanding of redox and where redox signaling molecules come from and the role of oxygen? Now maybe we could, if so, a great time to do that. If not, maybe we can start to talk about the differences between the active ingredient in our blue bottle in our redox signaling product and the actions of what's in our cell performance product. So anything else you think that would help the audience understand the basics of our redox signaling product before we move on to talking about the differences in the integration of the cell performance?
Yeah, maybe 2 points, and that is we talk about the molecules that we create in this company's flagship product, is C-Redox. as being bioidentical, that they're bioenergetic, and that we talk about them being native to the body. But what we've just described with the electron transport chain is the way the body makes them. And the molecule that's created when that final step, when the electron, doesn't get to that 2 to 3%, unreduced oxygen, the molecule that's there is called superoxide. And that is a highly energetic free radical, as you pointed out. And the molecules that are created in an electrolysis chamber from saline, from the electrolysis or, the electrocution, if you will, of saline, those are fractionated atoms from the sodium, chloride, hydrogen, and oxygen that's in the saline water. We're not electrolyzing saline in the cell. What we're doing is we're creating superoxide that then becomes transformed from a enzyme called superoxide dismutase. The process is a dismutation of superoxide to form hydrogen peroxide. And depending on the presence of some other catalysts and molecules in the cell, that superoxide can also be formed into hypochlorous. It can be formed into peroxynitrate if there's some nitrogen in the environment. We wind up forming hydroxyl radical and so forth. So the point is there's several other species or types of oxygen molecules that can be created in the cell from that. And we can create the same ones in an electrolysis chamber. And that's why we call them bioidentical. And the way we get that electron, that energy back up the hill, as it were, in an electrolysis chamber is supplying electricity. We're inputting electricity into that chamber and pushing that rock, as it were, back to the top of the hill, so that when it now is introduced into the body as a bioidentical element, it's now going to function in the same way that everything is working in the body. And yeah, you're right. The second point there, and I think this is the important point of all this, is that this process that we're talking about is responsive. And it's because nature doesn't waste anything. It uses these quote unquote free radicals that otherwise can do damage, which we've tried to eliminate through antioxidants for decades. It uses those same molecules to activate important pathway genes that are responsible for upregulating our survival, for upregulating our longevity, for upregulating the cellular renewal and defense and autophagy and so on and so forth. Those are the very molecules. And therefore, if we get too crazy with exogenous antioxidants and we think, well, I have to put all of these little spot fires out, we're actually kind of shooting ourselves in the foot, because we've now taken away that mild oxidative stimulus that the body requires to activate all the endogenous pathways that are important for cellular defense. And so it can kind of be a shoot yourself in the foot type of a thing. Those are the two things I would say, because nutrition is not responsive. And I think that's an important concept. We'll get into that in just a moment, but redox signaling as an innate or native function of the body, it is responsive. And I liken it to a thermostat on the wall. And we've talked about that before, where a thermostat senses or detects, because of the way it's engineered, the ambient conditions going on in its own environment. If it's too hot or too cold in the room, the thermostat will, induce a response to change or bring back to normal, or in the body, we would call that homeostasis. But it's to bring back a balance wherever you've, in a thermostat, wherever you preset it to. And then when it achieves that, it turns off. And so it's a responsiveness. You're responding to adversity. You're responding to stress. And I think that's a really good analogy for how the body works and why it's different from nutrition at a fundamental level.
Right. And that adaptive process is really what the redox signaling product is all about, because it's through that adaptation that it adds the protective factor and the repair mechanisms and the replace mechanisms, and those all work through basically transcription factors that are that are activated through this cell signaling mechanism provided by these reactive oxygen molecules or reactive oxygen species redox signaling. So it's very complicated, but in a way very simple. And if you want more information on that, I've recorded a couple of hour-long discussions on redox signaling if you really want to dive into that half of it. But let's kind of switch over and start talking about the attributes of redox signaling and the attributes of cell signaling and how they differ, because they are quite different. Like, as you mentioned, the cell performance products don't contain redox signaling molecules, and they aren't adaptive, really. They're not responding to a situation in the cell. Essentially, they're causing the cell to move or to do certain things. But I think last night's discussion on the Redox 5 group, it talked about one of the major differences is that redox signaling molecules are just absorbed. They're absorbed into your body. They don't have to be transported. That absorption process starts in the mouth and goes throughout the GI tract, and then they get transported around the body and the blood, of course, and then into the cells. And that's a passive process. It just happens, whether you want it to or not. When you drink redox signaling molecules, they go to work immediately. You may not notice the effects of that cellular protection, repair, and replacement for a while, because that process, takes some time. But they are working. They are doing they are playing their role in basic cellular physiology. So they're absorbed, whereas the cell performance products, they have to be digested. Do you want to kind of talk about that a little bit, Lee, about that difference?
Yeah, this is probably one of the more misunderstood concepts of redox signaling molecules, because I think most people, most health professionals even come at this from I'm going to call it a drug paradigm, but it's basically what we're calling a lock and key. There's a receptor site, and a redox signaling molecules are so tiny, they're so nanoparticle, they can absorb immediately through any and all tissues of the body. That doesn't matter whether it's on the inside or the outside. They immediately have access. But it is a cascading effect. It's not something that has to, quote, get into the bloodstream, unquote, in order to have an effect. I mean, it does do that. And it does, when you drink the liquid, it will obviously get into your stomach because it's going down your esophagus, into your stomach, and into your intestines. So yes, there is movement of these nanoparticles, through all of those, tissue barriers that line the stomach and so forth. But it is, because it's a cell cascading thing, it is a cell to cell quick. I mean, it's an electron movement, and it can go immediately. This is why, we've seen many people do, kinesiology testing type things with this. And when you rub these molecules or spray them or this thing, there is not, and you can immediately test it. And it's like there isn't enough time for this to have gone into the bloodstream and transferred to every cell of the body, yet you can see the effect on the energy level in the body immediately because of this cascading thing. Digestion is very different. And so what we're consuming in terms of, we'll call it plant material, because all of these are derived from plants. It has to go into the stomach and be digested. And this lock and key thing, and these are larger molecules. These are not nanomolecules. These are larger, we'll call them nutraceutical molecules, if you will, but they come from the plant kingdom. And they have very targeted effects because of that. Whereas the redox signaling cellular communication has a more global, overall, rapid effect. This other is more targeted. And so the mechanisms of action of that, and again, as we've said, the cellular performance ingredients they're redox active, but they're not redox responsive in and of themselves.
Right. And that's why, we say that you'll notice a difference. It's actually a little bit paradoxical because the signaling molecules get in and do their thing immediately, and yet you may not notice the effects for a while because it takes a while to repair and replace. And yet the cell performance products require this metabolic effect, and then they have to be kind of transported to where these targeted types of cells are, and then they have to have. And I think the second major thing is they have to fit that lock and key. So that molecule has to find the receptor on that cell that it fits. And when it fits that, it essentially, the way I understand it, it essentially causes certain redox sensitive reactions, switches, as you might call it, to happen in those targeted cells. Is that a good way to explain that, Lee? Is that how you explain that to folks?
It is, and maybe even a good example, to illustrate that would be appropriate. And that has to do with the ingredients in Redox Mind, for example. We've spoken on this in a previous video, but just to tie this together and show how they synergistically work, the Redox Mind product contains an ingredient called NMN. It stands for nicotinamide mononucleotide. And that is a precursor to a molecule called NAD. And NAD or NAD plus is a key redox molecule in the electron transport chain and through the Krebs cycle, but is also a critical element in activating a substance called sirtuins. And sirtuins have a function to protect our DNA. They help control the chromatin DNA structure, the packaging or the coiling and the repair of DNA. So when our DNA becomes damaged through radiation or environmental toxins or just through the hundreds of thousands of problems that it has in a day, just through normal metabolism and so forth, those damages or breakages in the DNA strands are repaired with the sirtuin activation. So you have NMN that is, and for it to get inside a cell, it requires a transport molecule. NAD, you can't supplement with that. And that's why you have to have its precursors in your food or your supplements. It actually is derived from folate. And so the point is that it requires receptor sites. It requires a transporter to move NMN across the cell membrane to get inside the cell so that it can then make NAD, which can then activate sirtuin, which can then do the DNA repair, which is what autophagy is and cellular renewal is all about. So you've got that pathway happening, but at the same time, we recognize that the activities, for example, of autophagy, which is the Pac-Man going around the cell cleaning up the garbage, digesting and recycling damaged pieces and parts of the cell, that is a redox event. That is activated because we have a slight bit of nutritional stress in the cell that is imposed through lifestyle measures or nutrition or fasting or exercise or so forth. That is what activates on the genetic side, the creation of or the activation of the pathway for these phagosomes to do the cleanup. So you put those two together, and this is where the synergism happens. Is we now have we'll call it bioactive molecules that we eat, from plant matter that we digest, that get into the body, that assist in the pathway of creating NAD and sirtuin activity and DNA repair. But we also have the under or foundational support from the redox sensitive transcription factors. And this is all happening together. And like one by itself isn't the full deal. It all has to work together. And so that's why this is engineered so So wonderful, in my opinion, is because you put those together. To use an expression, it's like 1 + 1 is 3. It's a synergistic. The outcome is more than just the sum of the parts in that regard.
And that can be a little confusing to folks, I think, too. But because you can use the cell performance products as standalone products. They do require redox signaling molecules for their, an underlying processes, or else they wouldn't work either. But
Right.
your body supplies those at some level anyway. But it also explains why when you're taking the cell performance products, you're probably going to notice a bit more effectiveness of the cell performance, because you're also supplementing and you're changing the underlying redox environment. You're moving the rheostat in the correct direction, and that helps these cell performance products work even better. But the cell performance is targeted to certain types of cells and certain end results. And, the example that you just gave, I love it, because it also shows that the cell performance, in addition to causing changes like with the mind in terms of mental clarity and that sort of thing, which happens really quickly, but it also has an underlying long-term benefit by repairing damaged DNA, which can contribute to longevity and, just a lot of things. You don't want to go through life with severely damaged DNA, because that has can have such a profound effect on our health. And so the mind is one of those products that doesn't just help you think more clearly in 15 minutes, but it also helps your genes to do their job over your lifetime. And so that's a really good example. So in essence, the redox signaling molecules are a non-specific response, but the cell performance products are targeted to achieve specific end results. So let me see here. I've got a couple of notes. Okay, let's switch a little bit here and talk about, I've had people say, well, I can get these ingredients in these cell performance products. I can just go to the health food store and buy NMN. I can buy these individual ingredients. Why should I take this product from ASEA? Can you speak to the importance of how of the interactions and the synergies? And, we don't have to go into the specifics of that. We talked about that before, but how different is it to take an ASEA cell performance versus just making up your own and going to the store and mixing all these individual ingredients, other than it's very inconvenient to have to do that. But, would you speak to that a little bit, Lee?
Yeah, I think I'm highly respectful of what's the product developers did in respecting the science behind, what we have. And it is true. You can go out into nature, you can go into a health food store, wherever you purchase or obtain your nutritional support. Ideally it should be from a good diet, a good, well-balanced diet based on good, nutritional foundational principles. I mean, you can speak to that more than anybody else here because of your extra training there. But the respect I have for the product developers is high, because what they did is they went in and they really looked at all the parameters. There are literally hundreds, maybe thousands, but there's hundreds of possible nutritional sources that could have been selected, and that in and of themselves, have positive effect on the body. There's no question about that. What we are not saying is that everybody else is bad, wrong, or indifferent. What we're saying is that the unique assemblage, the putting the specific ingredients together in both the sourcing as well as the quantities, the amounts that they were put in, was looked at in every direction possible. And it's like of the 50, or then the 30, and then the 20, and of the 10, all these possible ingredients that could have been selected. They selected those that had the widest, the most broadest application, that had the most, I'll call it hits. They they checked off the most boxes, if you would, on the positive or efficacious effect of these as they work together. And so that's my respect there. And I don't, we're not diminishing anybody else's attempt in the marketplace. NMN is a precursor. Where do you get NMN? But the question is, well, how much do you need? Maybe quality could be addressed, but that's, we don't need to go there. But the bringing them together in the proper synergistic, literature supported methodology, that's the critical thing here. And in that regard, they specifically pointed them towards the redox landscape. We wanted to have redox active because some of these molecules, through secondary and we'll call it tertiary messenger pathways, do have effect on specific transcription factors. They don't have broad, they're not like hydrogen peroxide that the cell makes, has broad redoxome-wide application. They induce thousands of transcription factors. That's why lifestyle is universally healthy. But from a exogenous supplement point of view, not all of the herbs, not all of those, nutraceutical or bioflavonoids or herbs and so forth, they don't have wide, broad redoxome landscape-based effect. And so that's why they selected the ones that they did, is because they're specifically targeted for specific functionality within that redox landscape.
Yeah, that's important. The other thing that you alluded to was the amount of any particular ingredient, and there are products out there that do designer labeling. In other words, they'll put something on the label and they will put some of it in their product, but they may not put an effective amount in the product. And so ASEA calculated the optimum effective dosage, so to speak, of each of these ingredients. So if it's on the label, you know that you're getting enough to get the stated benefits of that. And another thing is that many of these ingredients in the cell performance products are also independently proven and researched, and there's publicly available studies on the ingredients. And again, we commented on that in the May 7th webinar that we did. And that's important because you don't have to just rely on us at ASEA saying that this ingredient is beneficial. You can go to the literature and look at some of the branded ingredients that are included in the cell performance and look at the studies and the science behind each of those independently. So there's a real depth of science behind these cell performance products. So if you're interested in that, you can just Google those things and look at it. And you can look at the talk that we did on May the 7th.
One more thing, Dick, on that point is that with this blended synergy and the dosing, if you will, perspective, is that when the redox landscape, whether it is through, the general support from redox signaling or from the more targeted side, when the redoxome is better supported, we have less nutrient. We have less nutrient problems, fatigue. Because we use the word bioavailable. It's like there are circles in the wellness space that kind of brag about the mega dosing. They brag about the more pills you can fit in your hand. The more things you're taking, then the more the better your health will be. Well, more is not always better, and especially if your redox, it might need to be that if your redox landscape isn't healthy, because you're going to have to top load more just to have some effect. But when your redox landscape is well supported, you're not experiencing nutrient fatigue. The things are more bioavailable and they're more active in that regard.
Yeah, that's an important point. So, when we were chatting last night about kind of what to cover this morning, I had mentioned that I found it helpful for people who are not scientific and don't understand, have no idea what the Krebs cycle or a mitochondria is, that, one sort of analogous way of explaining kind of the difference between our redox signaling molecules and cell performance is to use the example of electricity, because obviously we're talking about electrons moving around. That is electricity. In the wire in your house, there are electrons moving from one place to another, and that's what powers what's going in your house. And so I found it useful to, and it's certainly not a perfect analogy, but it does help get people thinking anyway, is that the redox signaling molecules are like the electricity that comes through the junction box in your home, and then it goes to various places to supply those electrons necessary to run those appliances. But the cell performance molecules are like the switch that turns on that particular appliance. So you have to have something that switches on your stereo or your stove or your furnace. And that's really where cell performance comes in. It's targeted to help the body turn on certain aspects, certain appliances like energy or mental clarity or mood. And so those are targeted, those are specific switches. They do in fact activate certain redox sensitive reactions or switches, if you want to put it that way. So that's why everything has to have the redox signaling molecules to work, whether it comes from ASEA or the dwindling supply that your cells provide. But you can also activate certain aspects with the cell performance, just like you can turn on certain appliances in your house. And people kind of get the idea when I explain it to them that way. And then I know you've used the idea of a thermostat. If you maybe, how do you like the electricity example? And what's your favorite way of explaining in layman terms the different attributes of these two product lines?
Yeah, I do like the electricity idea. Electrons have to move. Each room in the house has a different function. Each appliance has a different function. Each of those appliances has an on and off switch. Just because you have electricity in the house sometimes doesn't mean that an appliance is going to work until it is activated, at the site. In the thermostat model, the thermostat includes a thermometer, and the whole point of the redox side of this, the redox responsive side, is this ability to detect or sense. An appliance cannot sense. It just turns on or off and washes your clothes or cooks your food or chills your food or whatever. But the thermostat has a thermometer in it that detects the condition, and then there's a response to that if it goes above or below, certain parameters there. And of course, that is obviously tied into the movement of electrons, the electricity flowing to whatever those response elements, might be. You still got to have the movement of electrons. And so taken in the whole, we're not going to live, in the ultimate sense, we're not going to live or survive just because we take cellular performance products, just like we can't live or survive if we only consumed redox signaling things. We still have to eat and have nutrition. And the question is, where do you get the best, or at least in a society that doesn't really, have all the best nutritional sourcing at our fingertips. But now with our science, we can target, and that's the whole point of cellular performance. Is I'm targeting, and I'm specifically targeting, and each of the products and the ones that will roll out in the future will have that same methodology, with it, as we're targeting certain things through that lock and key signaling type thing.
And I think that's really exciting, because I can't wait to see what the next cell performance product and technology is going to be coming from ASEA, because I know they're working on several. I have no idea what ones they are, but that's so exciting because it's almost unlimited, the number of areas that we can target that can improve certain specific aspects of our health. And that to me looking forward to where ASEA is going, I think is very exciting. We've got the foundation with the redox signaling molecules, which is really vital to life and to our overall health and protection, repairing, replacing, features. But then, I mean, there are so many areas of our physiology, especially as we get older, but even for younger people, because, like you say, we don't all get the best nutrition. We don't all get these ingredients that we need to make our body perform at an optimum level. So I think the future is just amazing, and I think we can kind of wrap it up on that. I think we've explained, hopefully in a useful way, to people the differences, the interactions, the synergies of these two areas of ASEA's product line. Do you have any closing comments that you'd like to make before we sign off for today?
Yeah, and that might just be to back up to a higher level, a bigger worldview of this, and that you kind of ended your comments there with the future and with those of us who are aging, and then a reference to those who are younger who could benefit. Ultimately, what we're talking about, in my view, is anti-aging. We're talking about not having age-related diseases or those non-communicable metabolic diseases that are so prevalent today. And the question is, if I started when I was younger, reversing or slowing down my biological clocks, the clock on the wall keeps ticking, but the biological clock inside doesn't really have to anymore. And I can tell you this is an intense field of research that over the next 10 to 20 years is going to be huge. They pretty well got it nailed down in single cell organisms and model organisms in research, but translating this into the human, where we can slow down the aging process. Even if you're old already, you can still benefit immensely. And even if you're young, if you can slow the process down. So I think this all is based on the redox, whether it's the lock and key, cellular performance, nutraceutical kind of thing. And especially if it's the redox responsive or adverse responsive side of the coin. The big picture is about how do you stay young longer.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up in closing. In fact, anti-aging, I'm 74 years old, so anti-aging certainly has an important meaning for me, and it's really one of the reasons, or it's kind of why I discovered Redox and ASEA in looking at anti-aging research 9 years ago, which has come a long way. But perhaps you and I ought to get together and do one of these on aging and anti-aging, because that is certainly an area where ASEA has a major difference. And regardless of what kills you in the end, if it's not trauma, it's going to be age-related. Every major illness, the most important risk factor for those illnesses is age. And if we can affect that, and physiologically turn that back and reverse it, we really do have something here with powerful long-term consequences. So maybe we ought to put our heads together and do a discussion about anti-aging. I think that would be fun, and it would require both of us to kind of go into the literature and see what the most recent stuff is. And it's what's being discovered is very exciting, and it all has to do with redox. So thanks for bringing that up. That's a great topic to close on. So thanks everybody for tuning in today. Hopefully you've learned something useful, both for your own information and for being able to explain both redox, or both of our products, redox and cell performance products. And if you have any suggestions for what you'd like us to cover on this, and I will mention that if you are interested in looking at the redox properties of some of our ingredients, there's a book over Lee's left shoulder there, Healthy Matters. A lot of discussion in there about redox and metabolism, and a section on on some of these phytonutrients and nutraceuticals, so to speak. So that's a good resource for you as well. So this recording will be on the redoxmatters.com website soon. So you'll be able to access it there. Just click on videos, which is along the top of that screen, and then search under my name, and you'll get the recording from today. So have a great weekend, have a great Saturday, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. Take care.